January 17, 1966. The Cold War was at its absolute peak. Nuclear weapons were constantly in the air, literally. High above the Mediterranean Sea, an American B-52 bomber was flying a routine patrol mission. On board, 4 hydrogen bombs, each one more powerful than anything dropped during World War II. What happened next was never supposed to happen. A mid-air collision, an explosion, and suddenly, 4 nuclear weapons were falling toward Europe. One of them would disappear into the ocean. 2 would break apart, poisoning the land. And hundreds of American soldiers would be sent in, without protection, to clean up a disaster they were told did not exist. This is the true story of Palomares, and the soldiers who paid the price. So, why were there even live nukes flying around in the first place? During the Cold War, the United States ran a program called Operation Chrome Dome. The plan involved B-52 bombers, loaded with live nuclear weapons, flying non-stop patrols near the Soviet Union, day and night. The logic was simple and terrifying. If a nuclear war started, the bombers were already in the air, ready to strike back immediately. It was a strategy of constant readiness, a massive, airborne nuclear deterrent. By 1966, this had become just another routine part of military operations. On January 17th, a B-52 from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base approached a KC-135 tanker off the coast of Spain to refuel in mid-air. This was a standard procedure, something they did all the time. But on this day, something went terribly wrong. The bomber came in too fast and collided with the tanker at an altitude of 31,000 feet. The KC-135, full of jet fuel, erupted into a massive fireball. Both aircraft exploded. 7 of the 11 crew members aboard the 2 planes were killed instantly. And from the wreckage of the disintegrating bomber, 4 Mark 28 hydrogen bombs began their silent fall toward the Spanish countryside below. The village directly underneath this catastrophe was Palomares, a small, quiet farming and fishing community. The residents heard the explosion and saw fiery debris raining from the sky. They had no idea their lives were about to change forever. One of the hydrogen bombs landed softly, its parachute deploying as designed, ending up in a dry riverbed. It was damaged but intact. A second one crashed near the local cemetery, close to the beach. But the other 2 were a different story. The conventional high explosives inside 2 of the bombs detonated on impact. Now, this wasn't a nuclear explosion, thankfully, but the blast was powerful enough to shatter the weapons, creating a cloud of highly radioactive plutonium dust. One bomb broke apart on a hillside, and the second contaminated a tomato farm. Plutonium, one of the most toxic substances known to science, was now scattered across homes, farms, and fields. The wind carried the fine particles for miles. The people of Palomares were unknowingly breathing it in. When Washington got the news, they panicked. A nuclear accident on Allied soil was a public relations nightmare and a terrifying radiological crisis. Within hours, the US military descended on the tiny village and sealed off the area. But instead of being transparent about the catastrophic danger, officials immediately went into damage control mode. They downplayed everything. They told the Spanish government, and, more importantly, their own troops, that there was no serious risk. They needed to clean up the plutonium, and fast. So, they brought in soldiers. These were young men, mostly in their early 20s, with little to no specialized training for this kind of disaster. Many of them had no idea what plutonium even was. They were simply given orders. Dig up the contaminated soil. Collect the radioactive debris. Wash down the local buildings. Handle the twisted wreckage of the bombs. And they were told to do this with their bare hands, or with basic cotton gloves. No hazmat suits. No respirators. No protective gear whatsoever. When the soldiers started asking questions, worried about this strange dust they were handling, their superiors shut them down. They were told things like, "There is no danger, and you are completely safe." That was a deliberate lie, told to keep the cleanup moving and to prevent widespread panic. The mission was the priority. The men were expendable. While this dangerous cleanup was happening on the ground, a massive search was underway for the 4th bomb. One hydrogen bomb was still missing, lost somewhere in the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. The US Navy launched one of the largest and most complex underwater search operations in history. The operation involved more than 30 ships, thousands of personnel, and advanced deep-sea technology, including mini-submarines like the Alvin. For 80 long days, they scoured the ocean floor. The pressure was immense. If the bomb's casing was breached, It could leak plutonium into the sea, contaminating fisheries for decades. If it had somehow detonated on impact with the seafloor, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Finally, a local fisherman named Francisco Simo Orts, who claimed he saw the bomb enter the water, helped guide the search. On March 15th, the mini-sub Alvin located the bomb at a depth of nearly 3,000 feet, resting precariously on a steep underwater slope. It took several more difficult weeks to recover it, but on April 7th, the bomb was finally brought to the surface, intact. The Pentagon declared the mission a massive success. The world breathed a sigh of relief. But for the soldiers cleaning up the plutonium on land, their nightmare was just beginning. After the ground cleanup was finished, the US military shipped over 1,400 tons of contaminated soil and vegetation in barrels to a nuclear waste facility in South Carolina. They declared Palomares safe, staged a photo op with the American ambassador swimming in the local waters to prove there was no danger, and then they left. The story faded from the headlines. But for the veterans who were there, the effects of Palomares would linger for the rest of their lives. 4 decades after the incident, veterans of the cleanup operation began reporting a disturbing pattern of illnesses. They were getting sick with rare cancers, leukemia, liver ailments, and chronic lung diseases. These were men who had been young and healthy when they were sent to Palomares. Now, many of them were dying slow, painful deaths. When they turned to the government for help, seeking medical care and benefits from the Department of Veterans Affairs, they were met with a wall of denial. The VA systematically denied their claims, arguing there was no proof their illnesses were connected to their service in Palomares. Why? Because the Air Force had never officially classified them as being part of a radiation risk activity. Their medical records went missing. Dosimeter readings that might have shown their exposure levels disappeared. The government that had lied to them about the danger on the ground was now erasing the history of their exposure. They were told their cancers were unrelated to their service. The very government that sent them into a toxic disaster zone without protection refused to acknowledge its responsibility. The Spanish villages of Palomares suffered too. Their agricultural economy was devastated. For years, no one would buy their tomatoes or other produce, fearing it was contaminated. Cancer rates in the small community quietly rose over the following decades, though official studies were often inconclusive or suppressed. For years, Spain and the US argued over who was responsible for the long-term cleanup and monitoring. To this day, more than half a century later, some parcels of land near Palomares remain fenced off, still contaminated with plutonium. The cleanup was never truly finished. The toxic legacy of that day in 1966 is still buried in the Spanish soil. The Palomares incident was not just a tragic accident. It was a stark warning. It was a terrifying glimpse into a time when the Cold War arms race treated nuclear weapons like routine cargo, and human lives like expendable tools in a geopolitical chess game. The bombs were eventually found. The land was partially cleaned. The immediate crisis was contained. But the truth? The truth was buried deeper than any bomb. It was buried in redacted reports, missing medical files, and decades of official denial. The soldiers who paid the ultimate price for this secrecy were told they were never in danger, even as their bodies were being ravaged by the invisible poison they were ordered to clean up with their bare hands. This wasn't some wild conspiracy theory. It was policy, and it happened in plain sight. If you think this is a story that should be remembered, please like this video. If what you heard shocked you, leave a comment below and let us know. And if you want to see more real stories that they never wanted you to know, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.